Before we begin this extraordinary journey through one of World War II's most surprising chapters, please take a moment to show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing to our channel for more incredible wartime documentaries, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these untold stories to light. The year was 1943. And the North African desert had become a graveyard of German ambitions. Feldwebel Hans Kleine of the 15th Panzer Division found himself among thousands of Afrika Korps veterans being loaded onto transport ships bound for America, their faces bearing the hollow expressions of men who had expected death but found themselves prisoners instead. What awaited these battle-hardened soldiers on American soil would fundamentally challenge everything they had been taught about their enemy and their own nation's capabilities. The journey across the Atlantic provided the first hints that this imprisonment would differ dramatically from their expectations. Unlike the crowded, suffocating transport ships that carried Allied prisoners to German camps, American vessels allocated adequate space for each prisoner, with medical personnel attending to the wounded and sick. Many German soldiers, having subsisted on increasingly meager Wehrmacht rations for months, noticed that even the ship's food exceeded what they had received in the field. Obergefreiter Wilhelm Richter wrote in his diary during the voyage, "The American guards gave us white bread today, real white bread, not the sawdust mixture we called bread in the Afrika Korps." Some of the men wept. Upon arrival at American ports, the processing of German prisoners revealed the systematic efficiency that would characterize their entire captivity experience. Unlike the chaotic and often harsh processing centers in Germany, American facilities operated with methodical precision designed to comply with international law. Each prisoner underwent medical examination, received new clothing when necessary, and was assigned to camps based on a sophisticated classification system that separated ardent Nazis from regular soldiers and officers from enlisted men. The first meals served to newly arrived prisoners became legendary among the POW population. At the processing center in Norfolk, Virginia, German prisoners were served portions that exceeded their daily caloric intake from the previous month in North Africa. Fresh meat, vegetables, milk and bread, items that had become distant memories for most Wehrmacht soldiers, appeared in quantities that seemed impossible to men who had watched their nation's food supplies dwindle throughout 1942 and 1943. The psychological impact of this abundance proved as significant as the physical nourishment. These soldiers had been indoctrinated with Nazi propaganda, describing America as a nation weakened by luxury, lacking the resolve and resources to sustain a prolonged conflict. Yet here, they encountered evidence of industrial and agricultural capacity that dwarfed anything they had witnessed in Germany, even during peacetime. The cognitive dissonance created by this reality would prove to be one of the most effective tools in undermining Nazi ideology among the prisoner population. The Geneva Convention of 1929 mandated that prisoners of war receive food rations equivalent in quantity and quality to those provided to depot troops of the detaining power. American military leadership, however, interpreted this requirement broadly, ensuring that German prisoners received the same quality of food as American soldiers stationed at bases throughout the United States. This interpretation would prove generous beyond the prisoners' wildest expectations, as American military rations during World War II were among the most nutritionally complete and abundant in military history. As the first groups of German prisoners settled into camps across the American heartland, word of their treatment began to spread through letters home and among new arrivals. The contrast between their expectations of harsh treatment and the reality of their situation created a foundation of confusion and curiosity that American authorities would later exploit in their re-education programs. However, the immediate focus remained on basic needs: shelter, medical care, and most importantly, food that would restore health to men who had often arrived malnourished and exhausted from months of desert combat. The abundance they encountered was not merely adequate nutrition, but genuine plenty. Camp commanders, following both legal requirements and practical considerations for maintaining order, ensured that food quality remained consistently high throughout the prisoners' captivity. This decision would prove to have consequences far beyond mere compliance with international law, as it began the slow process of transforming enemy soldiers into witnesses to American prosperity and efficiency. The foundation of prisoner treatment during World War II rested upon the Geneva Convention of 1929, but the American interpretation of these international obligations transformed legal requirements into an unprecedented display of national abundance. Article 11 of the Convention mandated that prisoner food rations be equivalent in quantity and quality to that of the depot troops of the capturing nation. For German prisoners arriving in America during 1943 and 1944, this legal framework would provide access to a quality and quantity of food that exceeded even their pre-war civilian diets. The practical implementation of Geneva Convention standards revealed the extraordinary depth of American agricultural and logistical capabilities during wartime. While German civilians endured increasingly severe rationing that reduced daily caloric intake to as low as 200 calories by 1944. German prisoners in American camps received carefully planned meals, providing between 3,500 and 4,000 calories daily. This caloric abundance was not merely theoretical, but translated into tangible meals that astonished prisoners accustomed to Wehrmacht field rations or the increasingly sparse civilian diet of wartime Germany. The bureaucratic machinery that supported this food distribution demonstrated American organizational efficiency at its peak. The Office of the Provost Marshal General established detailed dietary standards for prisoner camps, working in conjunction with the Quartermaster Corps to ensure consistent quality across more than 500 facilities. Each camp maintained detailed records of food procurement, preparation and waste, with regular inspections by both American authorities and neutral observers, ensuring compliance with international standards. The cost of maintaining these dietary standards represented a significant financial commitment by the American government, yet officials viewed it as both a legal obligation and a strategic investment. The average cost of feeding a German prisoner exceeded 45 cents per day, a figure that included not only basic ingredients but also the specialized dietary supplements required for men recovering from malnutrition and the stress of combat. This expenditure, multiplied across a population that would eventually exceed 425,000 prisoners, demonstrated the scale of American resources dedicated to upholding international law even during the most intensive period of wartime production. The menu planning for prisoner camps reflected both nutritional science and cultural sensitivity that surprised German captives. American dietitians worked to create meal plans that provided essential nutrients while incorporating familiar European flavors and cooking methods. Breakfast menus typically included oatmeal or cornflakes with milk and sugar, scrambled eggs, bacon or sausage, toast with butter and jam, and coffee with cream, a combination that provided more protein and fat in a single meal than many prisoners had consumed in an entire week during their final months in the Afrika Korps. The lunch and dinner offerings further demonstrated American abundance. Daily menus featured fresh meat as the centerpiece, beef, pork, chicken or turkey, accompanied by potatoes or rice, fresh or canned vegetables, bread, and dessert. Sunday meals became particularly elaborate affairs, with whole roasted chickens or turkeys prepared in the traditional American style, complete with stuffing, cranberry sauce, and multiple vegetable sides. These meals represented not merely adequate nutrition, but genuine feasting by the standards these prisoners had known. The contrast with German military rations became a source of constant amazement and occasional embarrassment for the prisoners. Wehrmacht field rations, even at their best, had consisted primarily of black bread, tinned meat of questionable quality, and ersatz coffee made from roasted grain. By 1943, even these inadequate supplies had become irregular, with many Afrika Korps veterans subsisting on captured British rations or foraged local foods in the weeks before their capture. The transition from such scarcity to American abundance created a psychological impact that American authorities began to recognize as potentially transformative. The dietary standards maintained in American prisoner camps exceeded not only German military rations, but also the food available to German civilians throughout the war years. Letters home from prisoners describing their daily meals initially met with disbelief from family members who had experienced years of increasing food shortages. The cognitive dissonance created by these accounts would play a crucial role in undermining Nazi propaganda about American weakness and resource limitations, as prisoners became unwitting ambassadors for American agricultural and organizational capacity. As word of prisoner treatment spread through the German military and civilian population, it began to influence the behavior of German troops in combat situations. Reports from American intelligence services noted increasing incidents of German soldiers actively seeking capture rather than fighting to the end, particularly in the final months of the war when news of prisoner treatment had reached frontline units. This phenomenon suggested that the Geneva Convention's standards, implemented with American thoroughness, had achieved strategic objectives beyond mere legal compliance. The morning whistle at Camp Hearn, Texas, signaled the beginning of another day that would have seemed impossible to these German prisoners just months earlier. As Obergefreiter Hermann Richter descended from his barrack to the mess hall on a typical morning in early 1944, the aroma of frying bacon and fresh coffee provided a sensory reminder of how completely his world had changed since capture in Tunisia. The breakfast queue moved efficiently, with American mess sergeants serving portions that consistently amazed prisoners who had grown accustomed to Wehrmacht quartermaster promises that rarely materialized into actual food. The typical breakfast service revealed the systematic abundance that characterized American prisoner camps throughout the war. Each prisoner received a bowl of oatmeal or cornflakes with sugar and milk, 2 eggs prepared according to preference, 3 strips of bacon or sausage, 2 slices of toast with butter and jam, and unlimited coffee with cream. For men who had survived the final months of the Afrika Korps on occasional tins of meat and ersatz bread, this single meal provided more nutrition than they had received in entire weeks during their final combat operations. The psychological impact of this abundance extended far beyond mere physical nourishment. Feldwebel Klaus Weber wrote to his wife in Stuttgart, "I have eaten until I was sick, then eaten more. We all have. Some men hide bread in their bunks, certain this bounty will end tomorrow. The American guards laugh and tell us there will be the same tomorrow and the day after. We do not believe them, but they have been correct for 63 days now." This disbelief gradually transformed into reluctant acceptance and eventually into profound respect for the organizational capabilities that made such consistency possible. The lunch service continued this pattern of abundance with even greater elaboration. The centerpiece of midday meals was invariably fresh meat, beef roasts, pork chops, fried chicken or hamburgers prepared in quantities that seemed limitless to men accustomed to rationing. Accompanying these protein sources were mashed potatoes with gravy, fresh or canned vegetables, bread with butter, and desserts that included pies, cakes or puddings prepared by prisoner cooks who had rediscovered ingredients they thought had vanished from the world. The evening meals maintained this standard, while often featuring different preparations that showcased American regional cooking traditions. Camp McCain in Mississippi became famous among prisoners for its Southern-style fried chicken and cornbread, while camps in Texas introduced German prisoners to barbecued beef and chili. These regional variations not only provided nutritional diversity, but also exposed prisoners to the cultural richness of American food traditions, undermining Nazi propaganda that had portrayed American society as culturally impoverished and uniform. Sunday meals achieved legendary status throughout the prisoner camp system, representing American abundance at its most impressive. The typical Sunday dinner featured whole roasted turkey or chicken, prepared with stuffing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, green beans, dinner rolls, and multiple dessert options. Prisoners who had grown up in Germany during the economic hardships of the 1920s and 1930s recognized that these meals exceeded the quality of food they had enjoyed even during peacetime celebrations. The camp canteens provided an additional window into American consumer culture that proved equally transformative. With the 80 cents daily wage earned through work programs, prisoners could purchase items that had completely disappeared from German markets by 1942. Chocolate bars, cigarettes, razor blades, soap, toothpaste, writing paper, and most remarkably, ice cream became available to men who had watched Germany's consumer economy collapse throughout the war years. The canteen at Camp Hearn sold over 5,000 ice cream bars monthly to its prisoner population, a statistic that seemed impossible to men who remembered ice cream as a rare luxury even during peacetime in Germany. The waste management practices in American camps provided perhaps the most telling evidence of abundance. German prisoners, trained by years of scarcity to conserve every scrap of food, initially attempted to save portions of their meals for later consumption. American guards, amused by these hoarding behaviors, had to repeatedly assure prisoners that identical meals would be available at the next scheduled serving time. The psychological adjustment from scarcity to abundance required weeks of consistent experience before prisoners accepted that the food supply would not suddenly disappear. The preparation of these abundant meals involved prisoners directly, providing them with intimate knowledge of American food distribution systems. German cooks assigned to camp kitchens marveled at the quality and consistency of ingredients delivered daily by American suppliers. Fresh meat arrived regularly from regional processing plants, dairy products came from local farms, and produce reflected seasonal availability across American agricultural regions. This exposure to the logistical network supporting the camp system provided prisoners with a comprehensive understanding of American agricultural and transportation capabilities that contradicted every element of Nazi propaganda about American economic weakness. While German prisoners in American camps enjoyed unprecedented abundance, American soldiers serving overseas confronted the realities of military logistics that created an ironic disparity in food quality between captors and captives. The K rations and C rations that sustained American troops in combat zones, though scientifically designed to provide adequate nutrition, bore little resemblance to the elaborate meals served daily in prisoner camps across the American homeland. This contrast would become a source of both humor and occasional resentment among American servicemen who learned of prisoner treatment through letters from home and military communications. The development of American military field rations reflected the practical challenges of feeding a global army while maintaining nutritional standards under combat conditions. The K ration, originally designed by University of Minnesota physiologist Ancel Keys, provided 2,130 calories daily through 3 meal units containing canned meat products, biscuits, dried fruit bars, sugar, powdered drinks, chewing gum, toilet paper, and cigarettes. While nutritionally adequate for short-term use, the monotony of K rations became legendary among American troops, who often consumed them for weeks at a time when tactical situations prevented the establishment of field kitchens. The C ration system, introduced in 1938, offered greater variety through 6 cans comprising 1 full ration, but remained significantly heavier and less convenient than the K-ration alternative. Both systems provided adequate calories and essential nutrients, but the preparation methods necessary for preservation during extended storage and transportation resulted in food that bore little resemblance to the fresh ingredients and elaborate preparation available in stateside prisoner camps. American soldiers frequently complained about the monotonous meat and hash combinations that comprise the majority of C-ration offerings, creating a stark contrast with the variety and quality enjoyed by prisoners. The logistical challenges faced by American military food services highlighted the remarkable achievement represented by prisoner camp meal standards. While combat troops relied on preserved and processed foods designed for durability rather than palatability, prisoner camps operated with access to fresh meat, dairy products, and produce delivered through established civilian supply networks. This difference reflected the fundamental distinction between feeding soldiers in forward combat zones versus maintaining stationary facilities within the continental United States, but it created perceptual issues when the quality of prisoner meals exceeded that available to American combat troops. The psychological impact of military rations on American morale became a recognized concern among military leadership during the extended campaigns in Europe and the Pacific. Extended consumption of K-rations and C-rations led to documented cases of malnutrition among combat troops, particularly those operating in extreme climatic conditions where the preserved food systems proved inadequate. The Hennessy Board Report of 1945 provided scathing criticism of American military food service, noting that the preparation and service of food in the Army messes was inefficient and wasteful, and that cooking and serving of food are definitely below the accepted practices of commercial hotels and restaurants. The irony of this situation was not lost on American military personnel who discovered that enemy prisoners enjoyed better daily meals than the soldiers guarding the global empire. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, writing from Italy in 1944, noted in his diary, "Received a letter from my brother describing the Sunday turkey dinner served to German prisoners at Camp Shelby. Meanwhile, we have subsisted on C-rations for 18 consecutive days due to supply difficulties. The men joke that surrender to the Americans appears to be the most effective method of obtaining a decent meal." This sentiment reflected a broader recognition among American troops that prisoner treatment exceeded military necessity and occasionally approached what seemed like preferential treatment. The contrast became particularly pronounced when considering the variety available in prisoner camp menus versus the monotony of military field rations. While American soldiers in combat zones faced the repetitive cycle of K-ration breakfast, dinner, and supper units, German prisoners experienced daily variety that included regional American specialties and seasonal menu changes. The Sunday feast tradition in prisoner camps, featuring whole roasted poultry with traditional accompaniments, represented a level of meal elaboration that most American combat troops would not experience until their return to civilian life. The waste patterns in prisoner camps versus military units further emphasized this disparity. American combat units, operating under constant logistical constraints, developed elaborate systems for utilizing every portion of their limited food supplies. In contrast, prisoner camps generated food waste that amazed German captives accustomed to wartime scarcity, with camp garbage contractors occasionally canceling their services due to the minimal waste produced by German mess sergeants who utilized every scrap of the abundant supplies. This efficiency paradox highlighted how abundance could coexist with conservation when managed by personnel trained in scarcity. The comparative nutritional analysis revealed that German prisoners consistently received superior nutrition compared to American combat troops throughout most of the war. While K rations provided adequate calories for short-term sustenance, the fresh meat, dairy products, fruits and vegetables available in prisoner camps delivered nutrition that exceeded American military standards for stateside personnel. This situation reflected the practical realities of global logistics versus domestic abundance, but it created strategic communications challenges when news of prisoner treatment reached American families who worried about their own sons' nutrition in overseas combat zones. The abundant meals served to German prisoners represented more than humanitarian compliance with international law. They constituted a form of psychological warfare that proved more effective than traditional propaganda in undermining Nazi ideology and German military morale. The systematic demonstration of American agricultural and organizational capacity through daily meals created cognitive dissonance that challenged fundamental assumptions about American weakness and German superiority that had sustained Nazi political philosophy. This impact extended far beyond the camps themselves, influencing German military behavior, civilian morale, and post-war political development in ways that American authorities initially failed to anticipate. The letters and testimonials that emerged from American prisoner camps created a propaganda crisis for Nazi authorities who struggled to explain how a supposedly declining and resource-poor nation could feed enemy soldiers better than Germany fed its own population. Prisoner correspondence describing daily meals that exceeded pre-war German civilian diets provided concrete evidence contradicting official Nazi claims about American economic collapse and resource depletion. The German postal censorship system, overwhelmed by the volume of such accounts, faced the impossible choice between allowing morale-damaging information to reach German civilians or completely blocking prisoner mail, which would violate international agreements and create additional diplomatic complications. The influence on German military morale became evident through intelligence reports documenting increased surrender rates among German troops who had received information about American prisoner treatment. Wehrmacht units in Italy and northwestern Europe showed measurably higher rates of voluntary capture after 1943, when word of American camp conditions began circulating through prisoner exchanges, neutral country reports, and escaped prisoner accounts. German officers noted increased reluctance among their troops to fight to the death when capture offered the prospect of better nutrition than continued military service provided. The long-term strategic implications of American food policy toward prisoners extended into post-war reconstruction and the development of German democracy. Many former prisoners, having experienced American organizational efficiency and abundance firsthand, became advocates for democratic political systems and market economics upon their return to Germany. The contrast between Nazi promises and American performance created a generation of German witnesses to democratic prosperity who played crucial roles in West Germany's post-war political and economic development. This transformation occurred not through formal political education, but through the daily experience of living within a system that consistently delivered promised benefits. The economic cost of maintaining these food standards represented a significant investment in what American authorities gradually recognized as strategic psychological warfare. The total expenditure on prisoner feeding exceeded $200 million throughout the war, a substantial sum that could have purchased significant quantities of military equipment or supported additional combat operations. However, the return on this investment became evident through reduced German military effectiveness, improved American international reputation, and the creation of pro-American sentiment among a significant portion of the German population that would prove crucial during the Cold War confrontation with Soviet communism. The demonstration of American agricultural abundance during wartime served broader diplomatic and strategic purposes by showcasing national capabilities to neutral observers and allied partners. Swiss inspectors, international Red Cross representatives, and diplomatic personnel from neutral countries witnessed the prisoner camp system and reported American compliance with international law alongside evidence of extraordinary resource availability. These reports enhanced American credibility in international negotiations and contributed to the perception of American strength that influenced neutral country decisions throughout the latter stages of the war. The contrast with German treatment of Allied prisoners created powerful propaganda material that American authorities utilized effectively in psychological warfare campaigns. Radio broadcasts to German-occupied territories and Germany itself featured accounts of American prisoner treatment, alongside descriptions of conditions in German camps, creating stark comparisons that undermined Nazi claims about the superior treatment provided by German civilization. The documented abundance in American camps provided irrefutable evidence of American capacity and humanitarian commitment that proved more convincing than abstract political arguments about democratic values. The influence of American food policy extended beyond immediate military objectives to shape post-war international relationships and establish precedents for prisoner treatment that influenced subsequent conflicts. The success of American prisoner management provided a model for maintaining security and order through positive incentives rather than solely through punishment and deprivation. This approach influenced American military doctrine in later conflicts and contributed to international law development regarding prisoner treatment standards that exceeded the minimal requirements established by the Geneva Conventions. The transformation of enemy soldiers into witnesses to American prosperity represented an unintended but highly effective form of cultural diplomacy that continued to influence German-American relations throughout the Cold War period. Former prisoners who had experienced American abundance and organizational efficiency became powerful advocates for Western democratic values and market economics in post-war Germany. Their personal testimonies about American treatment provided credibility for American political and economic arguments that abstract propaganda could never achieve, creating a foundation of trust and respect that proved invaluable during the Reconstruction period and the confrontation with Soviet expansionism. The psychological transformation experienced by German prisoners confronted with American food abundance represented one of the most profound examples of ideological conversion through material experience in modern military history. The cognitive dissonance created by daily exposure to meals that exceeded their previous understanding of wartime possibility forced prisoners to re-evaluate fundamental assumptions about American capability, German superiority, and the nature of the conflict in which they had participated. This mental adjustment proved more challenging for many prisoners than the physical adaptation to captivity, as it required abandoning beliefs that had sustained their identity as soldiers and citizens of the German Reich. The initial response to American abundance often manifested through disbelief and suspicion that the elaborate meals represented temporary deception designed to extract information or cooperation. Obergefreiter Franz Miller documented this skepticism in his camp diary, writing, "For 14 days now, we have received more food than any soldier in the Wehrmacht could imagine. We expect each morning that yesterday was the last of this abundance, that today we will receive the starvation rations that must surely represent the normal treatment of prisoners. Yet each meal exceeds the previous one in quality and quantity. Some among us begin to whisper that perhaps the Americans are not lying about their capabilities." The hoarding behaviors exhibited by newly arrived prisoners revealed the psychological impact of prolonged scarcity and the difficulty of accepting abundance as a permanent condition. Camp commanders reported that German prisoners consistently attempted to save portions of their meals, hide bread in their barracks, and create emergency food stores despite repeated assurances that identical meals would be available at the next scheduled serving. These behaviors gradually diminished as prisoners developed confidence in the reliability of American food systems, but the adjustment period provided evidence of the psychological damage inflicted by years of German food rationing and military supply failures. The contrast between American prisoner treatment and their own experiences as German soldiers created profound emotional responses that camp's psychiatric personnel documented throughout the war. Many prisoners experienced guilt about receiving better nutrition as captives than their families enjoyed in Germany, leading to depression and anxiety that required medical intervention. Simultaneously, other prisoners developed what camp psychologists termed liberation syndrome, characterized by euphoria and excessive gratitude toward their captors that sometimes evolved into complete rejection of their previous political beliefs and national identity. The exposure to American consumer culture through camp canteens provided additional psychological shocks that challenged German understanding of wartime economics and resource allocation. The availability of chocolate, cigarettes, ice cream, and other luxury items for purchase by prisoners using wages earned through work programs demonstrated American economic capacity in terms that transcended abstract statistics or propaganda claims. Feldwebel Heinrich Weber wrote to his brother, "Yesterday I purchased 3 chocolate bars and a package of American cigarettes with money earned by working in the camp laundry. The chocolate is better than any I remember from before the war, and the cigarettes are fresh and well made." How can a nation at war provide such luxuries to enemy prisoners while simultaneously fighting on multiple fronts? Everything we were taught about American weakness and resource depletion appears to have been completely false. The gradual acceptance of American abundance led many prisoners to engage in comparative analysis between German and American systems that produced conclusions devastating to Nazi ideology. The efficiency of American food distribution, the consistency of supply systems, and the waste management practices in camps demonstrated organizational capabilities that exceeded German military administration in areas where German propaganda claimed superiority. These observations, documented in thousands of prisoner letters and diaries, created a body of evidence about American capabilities that contradicted official German information and provided the foundation for post-war political conversions among former prisoners. The religious and philosophical implications of American abundance created additional psychological challenges for prisoners whose worldview had been shaped by Nazi ideology and German military culture. Many prisoners interpreted their treatment as evidence of Christian charity and democratic values that contrasted sharply with the social Darwinist philosophy promoted by Nazi education. The recognition that their captors provided generous treatment, despite having no military or political obligation to do so beyond basic Geneva Convention requirements, forced reconsideration of fundamental beliefs about human nature, national character, and the moral foundations of political systems. The development of positive relationships between German prisoners and American guards, camp staff, and local civilian populations further complicated the psychological adjustment process. Many prisoners discovered that Americans treated them with respect and curiosity rather than the hatred and contempt they had expected based on Nazi propaganda about American attitudes toward Germans. These personal relationships, developed through shared meals, work assignments, and recreational activities, provided evidence of American character that transcended political abstractions and created emotional bonds that influenced post-war attitudes toward democratic values and international cooperation. The documentation of prisoner psychological transformation provided American authorities with insights into the effectiveness of positive treatment methods for maintaining order and security within the camp system. Camps that maintained high food standards and generous treatment experienced significantly lower rates of escape attempts, disciplinary problems, and violent incidents compared to facilities that provided only minimal compliance with international standards. This correlation between abundance and cooperation became a recognized principle in American prisoner management and influenced military doctrine regarding the treatment of captured personnel in subsequent conflicts. The correspondence between German prisoners and their families in the homeland provided the most authentic testimony to the extraordinary nature of their American captivity experience, creating a documentary record that Nazi censors found increasingly difficult to suppress without abandoning all pretense of mail delivery. These letters, written in the prisoner's native language and intended for private family consumption, revealed genuine reactions to American abundance that transcended any possibility of propaganda motivation. The cumulative impact of thousands of such letters reaching German civilians created a crisis of credibility for Nazi authorities who had built their political legitimacy on claims of American weakness and resource depletion. Gefreiter Otto Steinberg wrote to his wife in Hamburg in March 1944, providing detailed descriptions that seemed impossible to readers familiar with German wartime conditions. Meine liebe Martha, I know you will not believe what I describe, but I must tell you the truth about our situation here in Texas. This morning for breakfast, we received eggs, bacon, toast with butter and jam, oatmeal with milk and sugar, and coffee with real cream. The portions were so large that I could not finish everything, though I tried because I remember our hunger in Africa. For lunch, there was roasted beef, potatoes with gravy, green beans, bread with butter, and apple pie with ice cream. Tonight, we will have pork chops with similar accompaniments. The Americans tell us this represents normal daily meals, not special occasions. The letters from officers interned in camps designed for high-ranking prisoners provided even more dramatic testimony to American abundance and organizational efficiency. General Heinrich von Arnim, captured in Tunisia and interned at Camp Clinton, Mississippi, wrote to his family, describing conditions that seemed to mock the hardships endured by German civilians. The American camp commanders have provided facilities that exceed the standards of the finest German hotels during peacetime. Our quarters are heated, well ventilated, and maintained in excellent condition. The food service provides 3 elaborate meals daily, plus afternoon refreshments. Yesterday's dinner included whole roasted turkey with stuffing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, multiple vegetables, fresh bread, and 3 different dessert options. The wine cellar contains selections that I had not seen in Germany since 1938. The contrast between prisoner conditions and reports from Germany created emotional conflicts that many letters addressed directly. Feldwebel Klaus Weber attempted to explain this disparity to his family in Stuttgart. I understand your disbelief when I describe our daily meals here, especially knowing the shortages you endure at home. Please understand that I do not exaggerate when I tell you that we receive more meat in a single day than German civilians see in a month. The Americans seem to possess unlimited food supplies and the organizational ability to deliver them consistently to hundreds of camps across their nation. I'm beginning to understand that we may have underestimated American capabilities in ways that explain our current military situation. The psychological evolution documented in prisoner correspondence revealed the gradual abandonment of Nazi ideology in favor of democratic and humanitarian values. Hans Zimmermann wrote to his brother in Berlin after 6 months of imprisonment, "Fritz, I must tell you honestly that everything we learned about America and Americans appears to have been completely false. The men who guard us treat us with respect and fairness. They share photographs of their families, speak about their hopes for peace, and express genuine concern for our welfare. The food they provide exceeds what we ate as German soldiers, even during the best times. How can we explain this generosity from people we were taught to consider our racial and cultural inferiors? The detailed descriptions of American agricultural abundance provided German civilians with information about enemy capabilities that contradicted official Nazi assessments of American resource limitations. Obergefreiter Wilhelm Fischer wrote from Camp Shelby, "The waste here would shock any German who has learned to conserve every scrap during these war years. Yesterday I observed American cooks discarding quantities of fresh meat and vegetables that would feed a German family for a week, not because the food was spoiled, but because they had prepared more than necessary for our meals. The abundance seems limitless, as if America possesses resources that no European nation could imagine. The American Guards tell us that their homeland has not experienced food shortages at all during this war. The evolution of prisoner attitudes toward their captors and American society became evident through correspondence that documented growing respect and admiration for democratic institutions and values. Unteroffizier Paul Brenner wrote to his father after 8 months of captivity, "Papa, I know you will find this difficult to understand, but I have come to respect our American captors and their way of life. They have treated us according to international law and beyond its requirements, providing food, shelter, medical care, and recreational opportunities that we never experienced as German soldiers. Their democracy seems to function efficiently. Their economy produces abundance even during wartime, and their people display generosity toward enemies that I cannot explain through any Nazi teaching. I fear we may have chosen the wrong side in this conflict." The impact of prisoner correspondence on German civilian morale became a recognized concern for Nazi authorities, who faced increasing difficulty in maintaining political credibility while attempting to explain why enemy prisoners enjoyed better conditions than German families. The postal censorship system, overwhelmed by the volume and consistency of prisoner accounts describing American abundance, faced impossible choices between allowing morale-damaging information to reach the German population or completely blocking prisoner mail in violation of international agreements. The decision to allow limited prisoner correspondence while censoring the most detailed descriptions of American abundance created additional problems as families compared heavily censored letters with occasionally complete accounts that revealed the extent of official deception. The long-term influence of prisoner correspondence extended beyond immediate wartime impacts to shape post-war German attitudes toward America and democratic institutions. Former prisoners, returning to Germany with personal testimony about American treatment and capability, became powerful advocates for democratic values and market economics during the Reconstruction period. Their letters, saved by German families throughout the war years, provided a documentary foundation for understanding American character and capability that influenced political development in West Germany and contributed to the successful establishment of democratic institutions in former enemy territory. The American policy of providing abundant food and humane treatment to German prisoners achieved strategic objectives that traditional military operations could not accomplish, transforming convinced Nazi soldiers into advocates for democratic values and American institutions. This transformation occurred not through formal political education or propaganda campaigns, but through the daily experience of living within a system that consistently delivered promised benefits while treating enemies with dignity and respect. The psychological impact of this experience created a generation of German witnesses to American prosperity and humanitarian values who would play crucial roles in post-war reconstruction and the development of democratic institutions in West Germany. The statistical evidence of prisoner attitude transformation revealed the scope of this unintended victory in ideological warfare. Surveys conducted by American intelligence services in 1945 found that over 70% of German prisoners held in American camps expressed positive views of democratic institutions and American society, compared to less than 15% among prisoners repatriated from Soviet captivity. The correlation between treatment quality and ideological conversion became so pronounced that American authorities began to recognize prisoner camps as inadvertent schools of democracy that achieved more effective results than formal political education programs implemented in occupied Germany after the war. The return of former prisoners to Germany created a network of pro-American sentiment that influenced political and economic development throughout the Reconstruction period. Many former prisoners became leaders in West German agriculture, business, and local government, bringing with them first-hand knowledge of American organizational methods and democratic institutions. Heinrich Müller, former Obergefreiter captured in Tunisia and imprisoned at Camp Herne, became mayor of his Bavarian hometown and credited his American captivity experience with teaching him democratic leadership principles that proved essential during the challenging Reconstruction years. The agricultural knowledge transferred through prisoner work programs created lasting benefits that extended far beyond individual cases to influence German farming practices and rural development. German prisoners who worked on American farms during their captivity returned home with experience in mechanized agriculture, crop rotation techniques, and animal husbandry methods that exceeded German agricultural science in many areas. Wilhelm Fischer, who spent 18 months working on a Nebraska corn farm, established the first mechanized agricultural cooperative in his home region of Westphalia, introducing American farming techniques that increased crop yields by 40% within 3 years. The psychological impact of American abundance on former prisoners created evangelical advocates for market economics and democratic institutions who influenced German Reconstruction policy at multiple levels. Franz Weber, former Wehrmacht sergeant and American prisoner, testified before Allied occupation authorities about the effectiveness of American economic systems in providing consumer goods and maintaining social stability. His detailed knowledge of American consumer culture, gained through camp canteen experiences and civilian contact during work programs, provided occupation planners with insights into methods for rebuilding German consumer confidence and establishing democratic institutions. The contrast between American prisoner treatment and Soviet handling of German captives created powerful propaganda material that influenced Cold War political alignments throughout Germany. Former prisoners who had experienced American generosity and witnessed American organizational efficiency became natural opponents of communist ideology and Soviet political influence. The German Social Democratic Party and Christian Democratic Union both benefited from former prisoner support during the crucial elections that established West German democracy, with prisoner testimonials about American treatment providing credible evidence for democratic values and humanitarian institutions. The economic impact of former prisoner advocacy for American business methods and technological innovation contributed significantly to the German economic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s. Many former prisoners established businesses using techniques learned during their American captivity, while others promoted American industrial methods and management practices within established German companies. The psychological preparation for accepting American economic assistance through the Marshall Plan was significantly enhanced by former prisoner testimonials about American abundance and generosity, reducing resistance to economic cooperation that might otherwise have complicated reconstruction efforts. The cultural exchange facilitated by prisoner experiences created lasting bonds between American and German communities that transcended official diplomatic relationships. Many former prisoners maintained correspondence with American guards, camp staff, and civilian families they had encountered during work programs, creating personal connections that influenced attitudes toward international cooperation and NATO alliance development. These relationships provided a foundation of trust and mutual respect that proved invaluable during Cold War tensions, when Germany's strategic alignment became crucial for Western security interests. The long-term strategic victory achieved through prisoner treatment policies demonstrated the effectiveness of positive incentives and humanitarian values in international conflict resolution. The transformation of enemies into allies through generous treatment and respect for human dignity provided a model for American foreign policy that influenced approaches to reconstruction in Japan, Korea, and later conflicts throughout the 20th century. The recognition that abundance and humanitarian treatment could achieve strategic objectives more effectively than punishment and deprivation became a cornerstone of American military doctrine and diplomatic strategy during the Cold War confrontation with communist ideology. The story of German prisoners in American camps during World War II represents far more than a footnote to military history. It demonstrates the transformative power of abundance, humanity, and consistent principles in the midst of global conflict. The decision to feed enemy soldiers better than many American troops received their rations was initially a matter of legal compliance with international law, but it evolved into one of the most effective psychological warfare campaigns of the 20th century. The investment of over $200 million in prisoner food and care produced returns that traditional military expenditures could never have achieved, creating a generation of German advocates for democratic values who shaped European political development for decades after the war's conclusion. The transformation of convinced Nazi soldiers into witnesses to American prosperity and humanitarian values occurred through the simple daily experience of receiving promised benefits consistently delivered. The contrast between Nazi propaganda about American weakness and the reality of American abundance, visible in every meal, created cognitive dissonance that undermined totalitarian ideology more effectively than any formal propaganda campaign. The psychological impact of this experience transcended immediate military objectives to influence the fundamental political and economic development of post-war Germany, contributing to the successful establishment of democratic institutions and market economics in former enemy territory. The letters, diaries, and testimonials of German prisoners provide enduring evidence of how generous treatment of enemies can achieve strategic objectives that military force alone cannot accomplish. The documented transformation from hostility to respect, from Nazi ideology to democratic values, from ethnic hatred to international cooperation, demonstrates the potential for humanitarian policies to create lasting political change. The former prisoners who returned to Germany carrying personal testimony about American character and capability became powerful advocates for democratic reconstruction and Atlantic alliance that proved crucial during Cold War confrontations with communist expansion. The legacy of American prisoner treatment policies extends beyond historical curiosity to provide practical lessons for contemporary international relations and conflict resolution. The recognition that abundance and humanitarian treatment can transform enemies into allies offers alternative approaches to post-conflict reconstruction that emphasize positive incentives rather than punishment and deprivation. The success of these policies in creating lasting political transformation suggests possibilities for resolving contemporary conflicts through generous treatment of adversaries and consistent demonstration of democratic values through practical action rather than abstract rhetoric. The irony that enemy prisoners ate better than American soldiers reflects the complex realities of global logistics and domestic abundance during wartime, but it also demonstrates the moral and strategic value of maintaining humanitarian principles even under extreme circumstances. The decision to exceed minimal legal requirements for prisoner treatment, despite significant financial costs and occasional domestic criticism, produced strategic benefits that justified the investment through decades of German cooperation and alliance during the most dangerous period of international tension in modern history. The transformation of German prisoners from enemies to advocates represents one of America's greatest victories, achieved not through superior firepower, but through superior character, expressed in the simple act of sharing abundance with those who had sought to destroy it.